I remember the exact moment my world started tilting off its axis. Not in some dramatic, thundering heartbeat kind of way. It was quieter than that. Just a sinking in my gut, like I'd eaten something off. It was a Tuesday. I'd gotten home from work early, feeling unusually light about life. I had just wrapped a big pitch at work that went better than expected, and for a brief moment, I had that rare kind of confidence, the kind that makes you believe you're doing okay at this whole, being a man, thing. I even picked up flowers. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of wild-looking ones I thought she'd like. Stupid, right? Flowers for a woman already with another man. Now, I don't believe in gut instincts for lottery numbers or picking stocks. But when something in your life is wrong, truly wrong, your body knows before your mind's ready to accept it. That evening, I walked into the kitchen and saw my wife, let's call her Amy, standing by the sink, smiling at her phone and that half-smirk she usually reserved for memes or me doing something dumb. She jumped when she saw me. Not a big flinch, but enough. Like a student who forgot the teacher came back into the room. Hey, she said, stuffing the phone in her back pocket. You're early. Yeah, I said, holding up the flowers like a prize I wasn't sure how to present. Felt like doing something nice. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That's sweet. We kissed. She smelled like vanilla and something I couldn't quite place. Cheap cologne, maybe. Or maybe I was imagining things. I brushed it off. Later that night, I noticed her phone buzzing in the bathroom. She'd left it on the sink, screen up, still unlocked. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. We'd never been that couple. But curiosity, especially mixed with suspicion, is a dangerous thing. I peeked. The screen showed a message from someone saved as Jay. My brother-in-law's name is Jared. Coincidence? Maybe. But Jared and I hadn't exactly been tight lately. He'd been dodging me for weeks, ever since we canceled a double date last minute and never rescheduled. My sister had even called to ask if I'd heard from him. Something about his mood being off. I didn't say anything to Amy that night. I didn't sleep much either. Over the next few weeks, things unraveled like a badly knitted sweater. She was out more. Weirdly protective of her phone. Showered at strange times. And Jared, he practically disappeared from the family radar. I started doing what any man on the edge does. I watched. I waited. I didn't confront, because part of me was hoping I was wrong. Then came the nail in the coffin. My sister, Mia, showed up one morning, red-eyed and shaky. She said Jared had confessed to betraying the relationship, and not just with anyone. With someone close. She hadn't pried, but she knew something was off. She wanted my help. We pieced it together that day. The late nights. The texts. The overlapping schedules. Jared had been involved with Amy, my wife, her sister-in-law, our spouses. I'd always thought betrayal would feel like rage. Turns out, it feels more like numbness. Like your chest is filled with wet cement. That night, I confronted Amy. Calmly, because anger seemed too small for what I felt. I know, I said, standing in our dimly lit kitchen, hands shaking around a glass of drink. About you and Jared. She froze. Her eyes widened, then flicked away. Guilt has a look. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. She didn't deny it. Not really. Just whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. Like saying you tripped and fell into someone's marriage. Now, this is the part where some guys snap. Or cry. Or break things. I did none of that. Instead, I made coffee. I handed her a mug. And I told her she had a choice. She could leave, pack her things, and go cry it out with Jared. Or, we could play it differently. Because, you see, Mia and I had been talking. Plotting. Two broken spouses in a foxhole, staring down the wreckage. And we'd come up with a plan. I won't say too much yet. That part comes later. But just know this, revenge, when done right, doesn't look like fire. It looks like ice. Slow, careful, deliberate. The next morning, Amy acted like nothing had happened. Made eggs. Kissed me on the cheek. Told me she loved me. I smiled back. Played the part. But something inside me had shifted. The man she betraying the relationship, the man I had been, he was gone. And in his place, there was someone new. Someone watching. Waiting. Ready. I always thought when a marriage ends, it would feel like a collapse. Like something inside would break and stay broken. Turns out, it's more like rearranging furniture after an earthquake. You take stock, you move things around, and eventually, you find a new place to sit. Amy and I spent the next week in what I like to call the twilight zone of pretending. You know, that weird limbo where everything looks normal on the outside, the coffee gets made, The trash goes out, bills are paid, but underneath, there's a quiet hum of something toxic. A marriage on life support, and both of us knowing it flatlined days ago. But see, while she was busy pretending, I was preparing. Mia and I had one thing in common besides being hurt. We weren't stupid. She'd always been the brains of the family. If I was the hammer, she was the scalpel. And when your spouse cheats with your sibling's spouse, you either drown in the madness or link arms and swim out of it together. So we chose to take back control. Now, I know, that's a loaded word. Sounds petty. Sounds bitter. But it wasn't about getting even. It was about getting back to ourselves, back to some kind of dignity. Because let's face it, betrayal doesn't just strip away trust, it erases the version of you that thought you were safe. We started by collecting the facts. Mia already had Jared's phone records, thanks to a friend in telecom. I added Amy's GPS history. She'd never turned off her location sharing. That alone was enough to make me feel stupid. She'd been meeting Jared in the parking lot of a yoga studio. Neither of them has ever set foot in a yoga class in their lives. I'll give them this. They were consistent. Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m., 37 minutes exactly. Long enough to betray your vows, not long enough to miss dinner. Meanwhile, I set up a burner email. One of those generic Gmail accounts with a clean name. Through it, I scheduled a consultation with a local PI. Guy named Lynn. He looked like a retired linebacker and talked like your favorite uncle with a grudge. When I told him the story, he just shook his head. Brother-in-law? He asked. Yep. And your wife? I nodded. He let out a low whistle. That's not betrayal. That's a full-blown soap opera. He agreed to trail them for 2 weeks. No cameras in the bedroom. I didn't need to see the act, just the context. I'd already seen enough when I looked in Amy's eyes and realized I didn't know her anymore. Back home, things got weirder. Amy started acting almost nicer. She'd cook my favorite meals, initiate conversations, even suggest we take a weekend trip, just the two of us. Guilt can be incredibly motivating. Or maybe Jared had backed off. Maybe their little fantasy world was cracking under the weight of reality. Either way, I played along. Oh, a trip sounds nice, I'd say, sipping the tea she handed me like it wasn't laced with lies. Let's figure it out soon. But at night, when she went to sleep, I'd sit in the living room, staring at old pictures, the beach trip to Tybee Island, the goofy Halloween costumes, that one awkward selfie we took at her nephew's piano recital. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the man I was in those pictures, the one who believed. The first big break came from Lynn, about a weekend. Got something, he said over the phone. They're not just meeting. Jared had been staying in a motel under a fake name, and Amy had been visiting. Turns out, Jared had rented a motel room on the edge of town under a fake name. Creative, but sloppy. Lynn had snapped photos of Amy's car parked outside the room on 2 separate Thursday nights. The same Thursday she told me she was working late at a school board committee meeting. Ironic, considering how she used to roll her eyes at people who cheated. Weak people, she called them once. They don't value what they have. Guess we were both wrong about that. Lynn dropped off a manila envelope at my office. I waited until everyone left to open it. Inside were 6 photos. Not graphic, thank God, but clear. My wife. My sister's husband. Hugging, kissing, walking into that rundown motel like it was a honeymoon suite. She looked different. Lighter. Younger. Like betrayal suited her better than commitment ever did. That stung more than I'd like to admit. That night, I called Mia. I got pictures, I said. Silence on the other end. Then a deep breath. So did I. We met at a diner halfway between our places. It was surreal, the two of us, siblings, sitting there over pancakes and scrambled eggs, comparing proof that our lives had been wrecked by the people we loved. We needed them to understand what they'd done, Mia said. Not bitter. Just steady. Like a surgeon planning an operation. I don't want to hurt them, I said slowly. I wanted them to realize the damage they caused. I want them to lose something they care about. Mia nodded. Good. Because I've got a plan. And that's when things really started to turn. You think the worst part is finding out. It's not. The worst part is pretending you didn't. After Mia and I confirmed what we already knew, that our spouses were playing house behind our backs, we didn't light anything on fire. We didn't scream or throw punches. We didn't even cry. We just sat with it. I remember her exact words. Let's not break. Let's bend now so we don't break later. Couldn't have said it better. The first few days after the truth sank in were weirdly quiet. Amy was still doing her usual, I love you routine like she hadn't tore apart what we built. packing my lunch, kissing my cheek, asking about my day. I played along. It wasn't for her. It was for me. I needed time. Time to plan. Time to breathe through the urge to ask, why him? And why us? And what happened to the woman I married? Mia and I stayed in touch constantly, secret coffee shop meetings, long phone calls, shared silence when there were no more theories left to spin. And then one day, she said, I don't want to just leave them. I want to teach them something. What? I asked. She smiled. They can't walk away without facing the truth. So we got to work. First move? Control the narrative. Not in the media, this wasn't some celebrity tabloid mess. No, I'm talking family, friends, coworkers, all the people who would eventually ask questions when the photos started surfacing and the last names started changing. We told the truth. Not with drama, not with bitterness. Just simple, quiet honesty. Jared and Amy betrayed us, I told a mutual friend at lunch. We're not trying to ruin anyone. We're just moving forward. And the thing about quiet, steady truth? It travels. Next, we tightened the legal bolts. Mia's a sharp one. She found a good divorce lawyer who moved fast. I followed her lead and filed mine 2 days later. We weren't going to let Jared or Amy fumble their way into a better deal by playing the I'm sorry card when the guilt finally hit. The paperwork was cold, clean, and final. No alimony. Equal split. But more importantly, boundaries. Restraining orders? Not needed. Emotional distance? Already miles wide. Amy asked me one night, why are you so calm about this? I shrugged. Because I've already grieved the woman I thought you were. She didn't have a comeback for that. Just went quiet, like she was searching for a version of me that still hurt loudly. That version was gone. Now, Jared? He didn't take it so well. Mia told me he showed up at her place one night, looking like a man who just realized, as turns out, fantasies have real-world consequences. Said all the right things. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Let's fix this. Mia let him talk. Then she handed him an envelope. Inside were copies of text messages, a printed motel receipt, and, my personal favorite, a photo of Amy kissing him in the parking lot, time-stamped and all. You didn't just lose a marriage, she told him. You lost a witness to your better self. You don't get to come back from that. He left in silence. Meanwhile, Amy was unraveling, but trying hard to look like she wasn't. She baked more, cleaned more, even suggested we go to therapy. We can rebuild, she said one night, placing her hand on mine like it still belonged there. I looked her in the eye and said, you started building elsewhere, without me. What do you think we're supposed to rebuild with? She blinked, pulled her hand back. The silence between us felt permanent. But here's the part they didn't see coming, not Amy, not Jared. Mia and I were healing faster than they were falling apart. We weren't becoming something romantic, not then, not yet. But we were becoming solid. Two people burned by the same fire, finding warmth in the ashes. By the end of that month, I was sleeping soundly. Not because everything was fixed, far from it, but because I knew I hadn't lost myself. I'd been lied to, betrayed, discarded. But I was still standing. And that was something. There's a moment when the anger fades, the shock wears off, and you stop asking why. That's when the reckoning begins. Not the loud, dramatic kind where people scream in parking lots or throw clothes off balconies. No, this kind's quieter, sharper, cleaner, like a knife slicing through the last fraying rope. For me, it started on a Tuesday. Amy walked into the kitchen like everything was normal, still pretending we were just a couple going through a rough patch. Still thinking she could play wife while moonlighting as someone else's secret. She made 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of me, and asked, do you still love me? Now, the old me might have hesitated. Might have said something careful, gentle. But that guy? He was long gone. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, I love the woman I thought you were. You're not her. She blinked. Twice. Then stared down at the coffee, as if hoping it might offer a better answer. Meanwhile, Mia was doing her own reckoning. Her lawyer had wrapped up the paperwork, and she'd already moved Jared's things into storage. No yelling. No confrontation. Just boxes and a quiet door closing. She called me the next day. I think he really thought I'd fall apart, she said. Let him think it, I told her. While you keep building something better. Funny, she said, that the two of them thought we were the weak ones. We both agreed. We didn't need to ruin them. We just had to stop shielding them from the mess they made. So we told the families. Amy's parents. Jared's mom. My sister. My cousins. Even our mutual friends, the ones who always said, you two are the perfect couple. We didn't dramatize it. We didn't embellish. We just said the truth. Amy and Jared were having an affair. It's over. So are our marriages. You know what's wild? Most people didn't even act shocked. Some shook their heads. Others offered apologies we didn't ask for. One of Amy's closest friends pulled me aside and said, "I always wondered if something was going on. She stopped looking at you like she used to." That hit harder than anything Amy had ever said. A week later, Amy finally broke the spell. "I ended it with him," she said out of nowhere. I told Jared it's over. I just nodded. "That's it?" she asked. "You don't even care?" So I told her the truth. Not to hurt her, just to say it out loud. I cared when it would have mattered. "But you didn't." She looked down at her hands. I think that's when she finally saw it, not what she'd lost, but what she'd thrown away. The final nail came quietly. I walked into the living room, handed her an envelope, and said, "That's the settlement. I'm not taking you for everything. Just what's fair." She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg, because even she knew that version of our life was gone. And this was just clean up. And now here's the part that still feels surreal. The more distance I put between myself and that wreckage, the more clearly I started to see the man I used to be. Not perfect, not naive, but hopeful. And somewhere along the way, I'd started finding that guy again. Not because of revenge, not because of closure, but because I survived it. One night, Mia and I sat on the porch of her place, sipping tea like two war veterans after the smoke cleared. "I still don't get it," she said quietly. "How they looked us in the eye every day." "I don't either," I replied. "But I'm glad they did. Give me every reason to walk away." She smiled a little. "You ever think about what comes next?" I shrugged. "Not yet. But whatever it is, I'm walking into it clean." You think the fire is the end, but really, it's just the part that gets your attention. The real story is what happens after, when the smoke clears and you're left standing in the rubble, asking yourself one quiet question. Now what? Amy moved out on a gray Thursday morning. No dramatic farewell. No big scene. Just a couple of cardboard boxes, a nervous glance, and a silence so thick it felt like it had weight. She asked if we could talk sometime. I said maybe. That was generous of me. Truth is, I had nothing left to say. And whatever she had to say, I'd already stopped needing to hear. I didn't throw away our wedding photos right away. They sat in a drawer for weeks. Not because I missed her, but because I needed to remember what it looked like when I believed. I finally tossed them after I realized something. That man in the tuxedo, grinning like he'd won the lottery? He deserved better than what she became. The house was quiet at first. The kind of quiet that feels hollow. Like when a storm ends and all the birds are still afraid to start singing again. I filled the silence with little things. Painting the walls. Rearranging furniture. Cooking meals I actually liked. Turns out I make a better lasagna than Amy ever did, and mine doesn't come with a side of betrayal. Mia came by sometimes. At first, just to vent. Or sit. Or say nothing at all. Eventually, we started laughing again. Not the forced kind you do when you're trying to forget, but the kind that surprises you. That sneaks up on you when you realize you're okay. Not healed. Not perfect. But standing. People ask if I've forgiven her. I tell them the truth. I've released her. Forgiveness sounds too noble, too clean. What I did was let go of the need to carry her mistake any further. She can haul that burden herself. Mine's already packed and shipped out. And Jared? Last I heard, he tried to get back with Mia. She said no. She didn't say it bitterly. She said it like you might say no thanks to a stale cookie. Apparently, he didn't take it well. Something about how people make mistakes. Yeah, they do. But some mistakes don't come with second chances, just consequences. These days, I sleep better. I still have moments, little flashes of what was. A scent. A song. A dumb memory from a trip I wish we'd never taken. But they pass. And in their place, there's something steadier. Something warmer. Peace. Not fireworks. Not romance movie endings. Just peace. Funny thing is, Mia and I started seeing more of each other. Not as wounded soldiers anymore. Just as people who made it out. She has a laugh that hits different now. And I finally started looking at someone without seeing what I lost. But what's possible? We're not rushing anything. Life's not a race. But if something's gonna rise out of the ashes, I'd rather it be real. So that's my story. I didn't get the ending I thought I'd have. But I got something better. I got myself back. And that, my friend, is the kind of when you don't celebrate with confetti. You celebrate it with a quiet morning, a clear mind, and a life that finally feels like yours again.